Welcome to my Macros for Writers course. Now, I suppose it's not just for writers. Anyone who spends a lot of time with their hands on a keyboard in Microsoft Word will benefit from this. So this is the first lesson, and we're going to talk about how to access the selection inside of Microsoft Word's macro editor. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to access the first paragraph of a selection with the intention of deleting it. Now, that doesn't mean you have to actually have a current selection, otherwise it wouldn't be quite as useful as it is. But without getting into any details right now, let's get started. Now, when you're doing this, make sure you're in a test document. Otherwise, you take a chance of messing up your regular working document. I've been there. Now, don't tell anyone, because I regularly write in my working document, write macros that is, but it's not good policy. You're taking a chance. So if you're willing to risk it, that's your business, of course. Now, a common word component we'll use is called the selection. In short, the selection object is exactly what you think it is. I'm pointing towards my monitor here. It's exactly what you think it is. It's the currently selected text, or just your cursor position if you don't have any text selected yet. Except there's some nuts and bolts that Word uses when it's interfacing with the language that we're going to be writing in. Now, you'll hear me refer to it as an object. Now, that has specific meaning in programming circles, but for us, it's just a thing in your document. We're focusing on just a cursor position right now. Well, we'll talk about actually doing something with selected text later. You can do a lot with the selection object. We're going to keep it simple today, but simple, but still very useful. So what's that? We're going to delete the current paragraph. Now, that may seem counterproductive, but it is something you're going to do, and I want to turn it into a keystroke. You can actually type the macros out manually, but if you want to assign a keyboard shortcut, it's definitely easier to go ahead and go through the regular macro creation procedure, at least just the beginning of it. How do we do that? I could come down here to the status bar and click the little record button in my Word window. It brings up a dialog box where I can create the macro. I'm going to cancel that out because I want to show you how to do it through the menu. Also, I can come to View, Macros, and Record Macro here. Brings up the exact same dialog box. Now, I'm going to give this one a name, Delete Paragraph Test. Now, I'm just appending test there because I don't want to overwrite my macro. Click Keyboard. In this edit box for press new shortcut key, I'm going to assign my shortcut Control-Shift-Delete. Now, I have talked about these various dialog boxes in previous videos, so I'm not spending a lot of time going through each element of the dialog box. Please watch the previous videos if you're interested in a slower, more detailed analysis of these boxes. But Control-Shift-Delete is the shortcut I use for this macro, the one I wrote for myself. Come down here to the bottom left and click Assign, and then click Close. Now, it says record there, but I'm actually, believe it or not, going to come down here to my status bar and stop it. Okay, so we have our macro created. Right now, it does nothing because we didn't record any steps, but the macro is there. Let's go over to the VBA editor. You can just press Alt F11 on a PC or Option F11 on a Mac, and that will bring up Word's VBA editor. That's basically the macro editor where we will write our code. Alternatively, you could use the View menu, Macros, View Macros. Now, I have a bunch of macros here. Just ignore those. I will scroll down to our Delete Paragraph Test and then click Edit. Both of them take you to the same place, the VBA editor. Now, mine has a dark background. That's because I like dark themes in my working programs. Now, I did this one manually. Yours will probably have a white background and colored text, whereas mine has a black background and colored text. So what you see here is my new empty macro I just created. So I'm going to put a blank line after these little comments. Now, the single quotes are comments, and I'll talk more about comments as we go forward. But basically, they're there to describe to yourself or somebody else what you're doing or maybe a problem you encountered. They're very useful. I do strongly recommend you put them in. The VBA editor puts in a kind of boilerplate macro comment there. I usually put a more descriptive one. But enough of that. Here we're on the first blank line. I'm going to hit Tab. Now, indenting or adding spaces in general, adding spaces at the beginning of a line The editor does not care. It doesn't even see them, to be honest. It strips them out, but it helps us read our code and make our code more clear. It's kind of like, just having headings and such in your document, but this is how we do it for our macros. Okay, here we go. Our first word, our first command. You feel the excitement building? All right. We type selection. I know that seems strange because it's a selection in your document, but that's one of the things I love about VBA. It's pretty English-like. Now we need to be able to tell the selection object what we're going to access. We can take actions with the selection. We can reference specific properties of the selection, like the beginning and the end. So the way we do that is we use a period or a dot. We call it a dot more than a period. And you might think we want to type delete, but that's not quite right. We want to tell it what to delete. We're deleting the first paragraph. If we type just delete, then it's going to delete the current selection, just like you had pressed the delete key on the keyboard. So we don't want to just delete the current selection. I'll get rid of that. We want to delete the first paragraph. So we need to reference the paragraphs that are in the selection. And what do you think does that? I told you VBA is pretty English-like. Believe it or not, it's paragraphs. All right, so now what do we want? Well, that's all the paragraphs in the selection. I want to pick the first paragraph. Believe it or not, you just type first. And then, now here's where I have to add a little bit. You actually have to tell it you want to delete the whole paragraph using the word range. Now we'll get back to ranges later. They're an important object, kind of like a selection, but we'll get to those later. Just for now, you have to put that there. Now that we've selected that paragraph, I can finally select my delete. And believe it or not, that's our macro. That's about as English-like as programming gets. Oh, did I say the programming word? Please forgive me. That's about as English-like as a macro can get. Now, I did skip a lot of details. I mean, I gave you a little bit here and there, but I'm not going to go into each command in this course in depth as I go through it. We're going to do what we need to do, and we're going to save it and be done and get out. So this is a fully functional macro. My macro that I used to do this looks exactly the same. Now, at the end of each lesson, I'll give you my final version, at least not my personal version, but the final version that encapsulates everything we've talked about in the lesson. This actually, believe it or not, is the final version. Nice, simple, clean and crisp and concise. I did add a little more explanatory comment there, but that is the final macro for this particular lesson. So I come over here to my document. I assigned it to Control-Shift-Delete. So I hold down Control-Shift, press Delete. Boom, it's gone. That's what I love about it. One keystroke and it's over. I hope you grow and learn with this, that you'll kind of get that little zing of pleasure that comes with shortening several steps into one keystroke. All right, you did it. Congratulate yourself. You have written a macro from scratch. Of course, I held your hand along the way, but that's okay. You're learning. Just like you hold that little toddler's hand and you love that toddler and you teach them the ways of growing up to be an adult, but you're going to learn how to do it yourself if you stick with me. So if you're skeptical about this, think about the next time you're deleting a paragraph, all the steps you have to take. It doesn't seem like a lot when you're doing it because you're busy, but if you can shorten that to one keystroke, then you're making your work more efficient. Especially you start implementing this on multiple things you're doing, then you're streamlining your workflow, kind of making Word work your way. Now you can also do some other variants here. You can do cut if you wanted to not just delete it straight out, but put it on the clipboard for use later. You of course could also copy. Now I have a separate macro written for both of these, but I use the copy more than the cut. And it's like if I'm copying a heading down or something like that, then I can just copy that thing down. I don't have to select it, just boom, one keystroke, copy it, move to where I want and put it in place. If your mind is spinning about what else could you do? What other things could you streamline? I'm so proud of you. That is awesome. Some of the things take more work than others, but I promise I'm going to go slow here, teach you what you need to know when you need to know it. This is not a typical programming class. Forgive my use of that word again, but I'm going to hold your hand each step of the way until you can write your very own macros. And matter of fact, along the process, you're going to get a useful macro almost with every lesson. That's my goal. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you can see the possibility. Stick around if you do, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.